Today we are featuring some speakers from the Bleckley Airport Memorial Committee. So with that, I think, Greg, I'm going to pass to you.
Okay. Thank you for having us here today. We're very pleased to be speaking to you. I'm Greg Zerker. I'm a native Wichitan, fifth generation Kansan, and 10th generation American. I'm directly descended from generations that served in the Revolution, Civil War, Spanish-American War, and World Wars I and II. Some of you may know of my father, Bruce, who was an attorney, practiced law for 46 years was a member of Clinton, Mitchell, Osterman, Zerker. I served a total of 22 years in the military. 8 of those years were in the Air Force. I was an F-16 avionics instrument and flight control technician, then secondly as a satellite and wideband tech. Then I branched Army to attend OCS, and I served another 14 years as an infantry platoon and light wheel vehicle maintenance supervisor. That's a mouthful there. And then lastly, as a public affairs, military journalist and historian. I deployed twice, first to Baghdad, Iraq during the height of the sectarian violence in 2005-06, and then secondly to Loghman Province, Afghanistan in 2010 through 11. I am most grateful, probably of anything I've ever done in my life, that my soldiers from our infantry platoon in Baghdad all came back alive and without major injury. Right now I'm going to share with you the Erwin Bleckley project from its beginnings to its present day. This multi-million-dollar venture began really in the most humble of ways. Erwin Bleckley's been on my radar for well over a quarter century, since the mid-1990s, thanks to periodic articles written by Eagle reporter Becky Tanner. On February 12, 2018, knowing that the centennial of Erwin's heroic death in France was approaching on October 6th that year, I proposed to my VFW leadership that we honor him in some way, even if it meant standing around his obelisk at the Wichita VA and saying a few words with a moment of silence. Well, they agreed, and I agreed. I accepted the leadership role. So in late April of 2018, I made an appointment to see Becky at our Wichita Eagle office. And I asked her if she knew of any plans to honor Bleckley on his centennial. And she told me 3 things I'll never forget. First, she knew of no effort to honor him. Secondly, she said it would take a lot of work to do the kind of large stage, a larger ceremony that I had in mind. And thirdly, that nobody cared anymore. Well, fortunately she was right. She was right about the first 2, but fortunately she was not on the last. But I've never held it against her. Well, thanks to Becky, she referred me to Doug Jacobs and a few other key people who had honored Bleckley in the past. Ironically, she was laid off from her job just a week or 10 days later from the Eagle. And if I would have waited too long, I likely would have never met Doug, and we would probably not be standing here today before you. So Bleckley Day took off. We secured the VA auditorium on October 6th, or for October 6th, and Doug and I planned and worked to make this event as big and memorable as possible. We invited the Bleckley descendants, and 30 guest speakers were pared down to 15. I very much wanted McConnell Air Force Base participation. I secured the speaking roles for the commanders of the active guard and reserve components, as well as color guard, an anthem singer, and a flag folding ceremony for the family. Well, we had no idea how responsive or supportive the business community would be. So out of 55 potential cash or donor sponsors we approached, 42 came on board. It proved to me that Erwin Bleckley's story, when it's presented the right way, Wichitans care and come through. So the investment of 20 to 40 hours of volunteer work every week from late April through October, it really paid off because we had 250 people attend that day on Bleckley Day, October 6th. I remember speaking at the podium at the very hour to a century later that he and pilot Harold Gettler were on their last flight. And I thought, wow, this is a blessing more than just a confluence of events. Well, 4 generations of Bleckley family members attended, about 15 total, to hear Dean and Nancy Erwin, Erwin's niece, thank us for the family. It made all the effort worthwhile. Well, I knew we had sparked something dynamic when just days later, I was returning the general officer flags to Colonel Mike Vernerdi at McConnell. He told me that he and then Colonel Josh Olson, who was the base commander of McConnell of the active wing, they wanted to honor Erwin in some way at McConnell. Well, thus was born Bleckley Lounge. I was honored to be an advisor and the keynote speaker on Dedication Day in January of 2019. And now Erwin is a permanent fixture at McConnell Air Force Base. I met Zach at the same time since Zach served as the MC of that event. Well, because of Bleckley, more retirement ceremonies, meetings, and events occur at Bleckley Lounge than during its past life. What's fascinating about this project is the interest and pull of Erwin Bleckley is more comprehensive than any of you really can imagine. Our Bleckley project has tentacles that reach the Pentagon, Air Force and Army units across the country, in France and Britain, and among many museums, historians, and veterans across the country. The Bleckley the Bleckley Airport Memorial idea was first birthed in August 2018, even before Bleckley Day. Doug and I realized that such a consequential local aviation hero deserved recognition at the most visited aviation venue in Wichita. That means Eisenhower Airport. So up until May of 2020, we are planning an ecstatic display of a replica DH-4 at our airport terminal with an accompanying memorial display of artifacts with a total cost of around a quarter to $500,000. Well, then Grant enters the picture. So I'm serving as commander of Erwin Bleckley VFW Post 112 when on Friday, December 27, 2019, I fielded a call from Grant Shoemaker. Grant's inquiring how I could help his father, Kenny, get noticed for a KSN veteran salute story chronicling his World War II service in the South Pacific. I later casually asked Grant if he had ever heard of Erwin Bleckley. Well, that opened up the floodgates to another conversation and Grant's addition to our Bleckley board. And to this day, I like to say it was one of the best birthday gifts I've ever received because it happened on my 62nd birthday. So our mission changes overnight. Last May 2nd last year, the Bleckley DH-4 suffered a hard landing during its initial test flight. This was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And the original restoration team decided to sell the airplane, but they allowed us the right of first refusal. Well, knowing we had competition for this historic plane, we went into action. We secured support from Mayor Whipple, Vice Mayor Cindy Kleka, and Council Member Brandon Johnson, and then a unanimous support vote from the Airport Advisory Board and the Wichita City Council on June 1st and 16th, respectively. Well, then we had to go before the Design Council on July 6th, and they decided protecting a $500,000 piece of artwork called Aloft in the airport terminal was more important than honoring Wichita's only native Aviation Medal of Honor recipient. So the 4-3 vote kept the plane out of the airport terminal, but ironically, later that month, we had graduated from a static display to an airworthy artifact, meaning the plane would not be inside the main terminal after all, but will fly the skies over Wichita for generations to come, and thus require its own hangar space and flight line access. So our intent, and by the way, we did secure loan to fully fund the purchase of the airplane. Doug and I are going out to Bowling Green later this month to pick it up with a trucker we're hiring from near Kansas City to bring it back to Wichita. I think the designated arrival date's probably May 27th or 28th. That's a Thursday or Friday. So our intent, to wrap this up, is to honor Erwin Bleckley with a restored airworthy plane and a static memorial that instills pride in every Wichitan, Kansan, and American. It's to share our greatest aviation hero's life, legacy, and sacrifice with all who pass through Wichita Eisenhower Airport for generations to come. It will enhance Wichita's well-deserved reputation as the air capital of the world. After all, Erwin's last flight is only the most famous and legendary flight among all the U.S. Army Air Service flights conducted throughout all of World War I. Congress and the military found it fitting to honor him with the Medal of Honor. He deserves the highest honor his hometown can provide him at our airport. We welcome support and funds from everyone. We're casting a wide net to involve the best and most committed minds and talent to make this project as professional and inspiring as possible. We seek not just corporate and business support, but genuine community-wide involvement. We want tens of thousands of people to be invested in this noble venture so that they can say they had a hand in its creation. All great ventures involve service and sacrifice. Sometimes that involves risking one's life and the shedding of blood. When I think of Erwin, the biblical verse in John 15:13 comes to mind. Greater love hath no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. All we are doing is taking care of unfinished business. I like to end my talks with folks like you with this. How can the air capital not honor its greatest aviation hero at its own airport? Thank you for your time, and here's Doug to tell you about Erwin Bleckley, the man.
Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel of the United States Army. Spent a lot of my years in the Kansas National Guard up in Topeka. And I found out about Erwin sometime, by the way, several of you I've met here before or around Wichita, because I have been in Wichita a number of times to do displays and things at your museums and down at the riverfront and different places. I'm always promoting Harold, because 25 years ago, I met Harold by accident. Not Harold, I'm sorry. Erwin by accident. I found out that he was not in the Kansas National Guard Hall of Fame, and I thought that was wrong, because he, being a Medal of Honor recipient, was supposed to be in our Hall of Fame. So I went through a whole effort to make sure that he got in the Hall of Fame. He is in the Hall of Fame now up in Topeka. He's also in the 35th Division Hall of Fame. I'm going to talk to you in a little bit different perspective today, and I hope you find it interesting. I don't think it's as exciting as the history of what he did to receive the Medal of Honor, but that is history, and you can go out and read it or ask us. We'll come back and talk about it. I'm talking about all the heroics associated with why he received the Medal of Honor. But before you ask, I want to tell you who Erwin was, and a lot of people don't know who Erwin was, and I'm talking about the man. I could talk for hours and hours. My wife would attest to that if she was here. I'm going to read a little bit of this just to keep me on track and make sure that I get all this information provided to you today. But history records that Erwin and Harold Gettler, gave their lives during their mission, the process of locating and dropping supplies, desperately needed supplies, to soldiers of the 77th Division trapped in the forest below. With their sacrifice, at least 394 soldiers' lives were saved. In 1923, a military review board recommended that the Distinguished Service Cross that they both had been awarded be upgraded to the Congressional Medal of Honor. At that time, they joined 2nd Lieutenant Frank Luke and Captain Eddie Rickenbacker as the only 4 Medals of Honor recipients from World War I for Army aviation aviators. Erwin was one of the only 85 Medal of Honors that were given for service during World War I. Think about that. He's the first recipient considered for the Air National Guard Medal nationally for the Air Force. Now remember, World War I, it was the Army Air Service. World War II, it was the Army Air Corps. And after World War, hopefully no more, but it's called the U.S. Air Force now. So Army Air Service, Army Air Corps, United States Air Force. And historically speaking, on October the 5th of 1918, Erwin became one of the first men in U.S. military history to resupply combat troops on the ground from the air. This is common practice today, but Erwin was one of the first to do this. There's some historians, and I think you might have one coming in the near future if it all works out, who will say that they failed in their mission to get the supplies on target. And I will debate that issue with them because I think there was a significant effort that Erwin and the crew of the 50th Aero Squadron made to supply those troops on the ground. Let me recap this real quick, because that was a little bit sketchy there. But this should be important to you as a pride as citizens of Wichita. First off, he helped save the lives of 395 people. Can you imagine the number of descendants from those 394 people today and what they may be doing in the world today because their relative was saved? Second, he received one of the 4 Medals of Honor for the Army, the U.S. Army Air Service. Okay, so one of 4 to receive that. He was one of the 85 that received the Medal of Honor in World War I. Only 85 out of the millions of soldiers that we sent to Europe. Okay, so that's significant. 4, he received the first Medal of Honor for the United States Air National Guard, and that is pretty significant. 5, he was one of 8 members of the Kansas National Guard that received the Medal of Honor, that has received the Medal of Honor. And 6, he contributed directly to the art of welfare, not only in the United States of America, but across the world entirely because of the effort of aerial resupply and combat operations. Think about that. Young guy from Wichita, Kansas, 23-year-old young man from Kansas, a field artilleryman of the Kansas National Guard, same young man, his name was Erwin Bleckley. Some of you already know all this part of the story, or some of you might know that part of the story. You certainly know the historic record. But who was he as a person? Erwin was the second child of 4 from Elmer E. and Margaret Bleckley, his parents. They were very strong pillars of the Wichita community through the railroad, through business, through civic, and through religious activities. Erwin's core value of life resulted when his younger brother George died suddenly when he was an infant. George's death had a profound effect on Erwin as a 4-year-old. But it was his sister Merva's death when he was 10 that had the greatest impact of all. His sibling's death contributed significantly to the attitude about life and how precious it was. It also affected the relationship with his family and friends. It was near the time of his sister's death that he met his best friend in the world, Frank T. Priest. Some of you may recognize that name here in Wichita because Frank T. Priest, I believe, still sells real estate here in the community. Erwin had another brother, Clarence, and Clarence had 2 daughters, Dorothy and Nancy. And even though the family never talked much about Erwin and what his contributions were, they were very proud of him. And today, Nancy, as you heard, you heard about Nancy, but she lives in Shreveport, Louisiana, one of the nieces. In 1917, President Wilson instituted a registration day for all eligible young men. It was Frank, the best friend, that convinced Erwin to enlist in F Battery of the Kansas 1st Field Artillery here in Wichita, Kansas National Guard. Thanks to that decision, both young men became officers in the battery. They recruited together. They trained together, they mobilized together, they traveled to France together, and since Erwin was really good in math, he became a forward observer, and it was a forward observer's job to spot and calculate fire missions for the artillery. When the unit got to France, the Army requested that all forward observers, interested forward observers, become aerial observers, and Erwin volunteered. After graduating from aerial training, he was attached to the 50th Aero Squadron, but he was still a member of the 35th Division, the Kansas National Guard, our National Guard here in Kansas. Erwin was born in a house, and I'd invite you to look at some of the pictures we have over there. His house, I've showed a picture of the before and after pictures of the house at 609 North Francis, and that house is still there, by the way, and you've probably driven by it hundreds of times. It's right next to, and I think it's called the Nut House. Okay, so right next to that is, you see a big green house there, and that was the house. So, Nut House, I don't know. Okay, you take that for what it's worth. After the family moved from that house that they rented, they bought a house over on North Lorraine Street. There's not a lot known about Erwin during this period of time, other than he was very involved in the St. John's Episcopal Church youth group, and that he spent a lot of time with his best friend in the world, Frank T. Priest. His family became founding members of the St. James Episcopal Church, if you know where that is, right down the street from on Douglas. What I found out that, as noted in his yearbook, I guess being English was pretty important to him back then, because if it was something special enough that all of the students included in the notes on their senior page that they belonged to the English course, it must have been special. I'm not sure why, but it must have been special. But he was also on the basketball team in 1913, treasurer of the student council in 1913, in the senior play in 1913. He was a photographer for the annual in a number of years. And he assisted, he was the assistant business manager of the Messenger, which was the student newspaper, and that was in 1912. He loved mathematics and the girls. He was teased about his full head of hair and was voted most likely to become a banker like his father. While a member of the student council, he assisted in getting an all-sports banquet approved, and I think that it's still in your school today here in Wichita, the all-sports banquet. And he was on the student council that put that into place. He was quoted in the annual as saying he was fond of girls, but thinks business comes before pleasure. And I think that directly has an impact on his decision later in life. I believe that this became his mantra and most likely explains why he sacrificed and made the decision on the morning of October 6th to fly that second most dangerous mission, knowing that duty first was to help those trapped soldiers on the ground. That was Erwin. I have a lot more stories to tell about Erwin. I have a lot to tell about his special interest, love interest, and I think you should. Maybe we can discuss that later. I think we'll have some time. I'd be happy to tell you that. And that's a fascinating story. So keep that in mind. But also, if you would like to have talk about the historical endeavors, I'll be happy to do that later. And be ready. You have questions. That's all I have. I'm going to introduce our other board member, Grant Shoemaker.
Well, I'm Grant Shoemaker. I'm the third leg of the tricycle that's trying to get Bleckley pedaled out to the terminal for a display that's commensurate with the achievement that he did for all of us. But a lot of you guys I know are businessmen, and you need to hear the business plan. So I'm going to explain what we want to do and how much it's going to cost. So we were offered this aircraft, and the DH-4 that which we have acquired, 10,000 man-hours and 5 years were put into the restoration of the aircraft, and it'll be coming up on the screen. This aircraft is the last military DH-4 left in the world that's flyable, or will be flyable. What we did was, it kind of fell out of the sky. Originally, as Greg said, we were intending to put a mock-up in the terminal. However, that didn't work out, and a few days after May 2nd, a year ago of this month, the foundation that restored this airplane did its initial test flight, and unfortunately, the aircraft was damaged on its maiden flight. The turnbuckle, it's turnbuckles and cables off of a stick that control it. One of the turnbuckles was rigged quite right. It was fine under a static load, but when you got under a dynamic load, it kind of bound up, and so they had a little trouble getting it back on the ground. Unfortunately, the aircraft ground looped and had some lower left wing damage, a little upper left wing damage. The gear went out sideways, and then it tipped over on its nose. So we have some items to repair. However, the parts are all there, and the parts that need to be repaired are great patterns for what we need to do to get it going. So I'm going to give you a quick summary on what we're going to do. First with the aircraft, then the other two components of the memorial that we want to put together. First is the acquisition. The aircraft was offered to us for $105,000. The engine alone is worth more than that. It has its original Liberty 400 horse engine that was delivered with the aircraft. That was gone through, but unfortunately, there was a ground strike with the propeller. FAA requires that we go ahead and take the engine, pull the crankshaft out, magnaflux, and put it on a dial indicator to make sure it's not bent. Good thing going for us in that direction is the fact that it was back at idle, it was on grass, and it was a wooden propeller. So the odds are probably a 90% in our favor that we have a good, solid engine. All we have to do is come up with a new propeller. That's about $9,000. The engine inspection is going to be about $10,000. We're going to have to truck it all the way up to Boise, Idaho. And the same gentleman that restored it to start with was willing to do the inspection for us. So another $4,000 to get it up and back. And then unfortunately, the lower part of the radiator got damaged. Now, luckily there's enough antique car enthusiasts that keep this one company called Brassworks in business. And they build the honeycomb radiators for Packards and Marmons and Pierce Arrows. They said that they can rebuild the bottom 1/3 of our original radiator for about $15,000. Stop right there, bring it back up. Right here, stop, bring it up about just slightly up. Show me the medallion. There we go. The attention to detail that they had, this is an original 1918 manufactured data plate from Wright Airplane Company. There were so many airplanes in the pipeline and the war stopped. The foundation had found an original unstamped data plate made in 1918. The FAA allowed them to put the Bleckley serial number of the number 6 airplane they flew the mission on and the U.S. Air Service inventory number. So that's an original data plate from that time period with Bleckley's numbers on it. So as far as the FAA is concerned, that's Bleckley's airplane. Now we are going to do a forensic geo search of the crash site as soon as the pandemic restrictions are lifted in France, and that will allow us to go in and see if we can find any surviving parts. It came in pretty hard, so we don't know, but there's a chance we'll have some parts to put with it. So we're looking at basically 15 for the radiator. The airframe repair, we're estimating about 400 hours. And landing gear, that's part of that. The landing gear is probably the most damaged part, but that's fairly easy to repair. The fuselage itself and the engine, all intact, didn't get hurt, not even the tail feathers. So we came away from that crash right in here. The landing gear came out this way and went down on its left wing. We probably got 2 spars to put together to rebuild and some ribs. It deflected the upper left wing up about 10 inches, so until I get the fabric off of it, I won't know what the damage is. At the very least, possibly a couple of spars. Doubtful if any ribs need to be replaced. So it's here, down here, and the radiator with an engine teardown. With that in mind, we should be able to have the airplane back up and running. I'm estimating probably 900 man-hours on the wings at best. New spars and wood, maybe $3,100. Dope, paint, everything else about $3,500. We're estimating to have the airplane up. The acquisition price of $105 plus all the repairs, we're looking at about $179,000. Now, compare that to Doc. That's a drop in the bucket. But when you compare it to the historical significance and the Medal of Honor mission that this airplane did, we're getting a bargain. We're getting a real bargain. The other part of our memorial will be a full-size life bronze statue of Erwin in his aviator uniform to stand beside his airplane at the terminal. We've got an estimate of $65,000 from one of the more preeminent military sculpture guys that said he could do it for us, and it'll be similar in size and look to the one of Frank Luke that stands in front of the Capitol in Phoenix, of Frank Luke's home estate. So our third part of the triad of the display memorial will be the display cases holding the artifacts from Bleckley. We want to have what we call a suspended glass, just a small pedestal, and we're going to have a glass laminate that will self-illuminate, and in that we will have the original artifacts and awards of Bleckley suspended in air next to the aircraft, so that when you read, you can see both sides of the artifacts that we're going to display. Now, the venue has changed because of the fact that we want to fly this airplane. We're going to make this airplane airworthy. So what we're going to do is we're going to request that the city apply for an airport terminal extension on the west side where the ticketing is, and simply add a 60 by 40 glass addition, identical in shape and form to the present terminal, and we want to display the aircraft on that wing. The only difference being that we're going to open up the back side of it to where we can roll the airplane out right onto the flight line. At that point, this airplane is going to be flying above Wichita every Memorial Day, every 4th of July, every Labor Day, and every October 6th, which was the date of the mission. Now, when we're talking about artifacts, I have an electronic net out over the entire electronic universe. Just in the last few weeks, just as the airplane fell out of the sky and landed in our laps, we have some of the documents of Erwin's that were lost forever. They vanished. The family lost track of them. They ended up in a garage sale. And we were able to track down the person that got them at the garage sale that listed them on eBay. And I contacted him personally and told him what we were trying to do. And he donated them to the foundation. This gathering, you guys are the first ones to see, and this is only second in historical significance to the Medal of Honor. This is Erwin's Columbia Killed in Action certificate created by President Wilson. Only 3 of these were given to Medal of Honor winners from the Air Service. Rickenbacker, of course, was not killed, but Frank Luke has one, Gettler's family had one, and this is Erwin's. It's hung in the Erwin home. It was lost, and it ended up in a garage sale. So we've acquired it. We're gonna display it here. We'll have it over by the donation jar over here. So I encourage all of you, and if you can set it right here in front, to take a real close look at it and read the words. It's significant. So, as you all are aware, and that's part of why you're part of this organization that we're in here right today, all of our prosperity and all of our freedom that we all enjoy today was paid for in blood. And Erwin's the one that stepped up and did that 100 years ago. So now it's our turn to pay him back. And so with your political support, with your monetary support, we can make this memorial happen. And it's more than just paying Erwin back. People passing through the terminal are going to take note of the way Wichita venerates its Medal of Honor recipients and how it treats its soldiers and sailors. So you've got a chance to help pay Erwin back. We invite you to come over and take a look at the document. Anybody that makes $1,000 or more donation, I have, to the best of our ability, commissioned exact reproductions of the Killed in Honor or Killed in Action certificate, the Columbia certificate, and I'll have one displayed over here. And you cannot hardly tell it from the original. So I appreciate your attention to this. I'm going to invite Zach Braun. He's going to be kicking off our fundraising event to introduce the airplane and Bleckley to the community at large. So I'm going to ask Zach to come up, give you a 2-minute briefing on that. After he's done, then all of us will stand here, and at your convenience, we will answer any questions. Zach, it's all yours.
Thanks, Grant.
Yeah.
Hi guys, we'll try to keep it upbeat. The Bleckley project is something special for Wichita. I'm an Air Force pilot down at the base, flew KC-135s, 2 combat deployments, fly the KC-46 now. And I really love aviation, I love flying. I met Greg 2 years ago at the Bleckley lounge dedication on base. We closed out the Commander-in-Chief's Excellence installation team. They came in, said McConnell Air Force Base was the 2nd best Air Force base in the world. And that's a testament to our partnership with the Wichita community and with you all here. So our fundraiser event, I'm going to be setting the world record for the maximum number of takeoff and landings by a single pilot in a 24-hour period. I'm going to be doing that in Wichita, the air capital of the world, in a Wichita-built Cessna 150E model 1964, rolled off the line. It's lived its entire life in the city of Wichita. It's aviation heritage, honoring aviation heritage. It's the perfect match. The number of landings we're going for is going to be 475. I'll be probably leaning to the left for a few weeks after that, after so many circuits and so many landings. But it's going to be an educational opportunity for our youth, for business partners to come out and see the airplane, for you all to invite your friends and family and spend a nice June Saturday, the 26th, outside with us. Robert Laplander, preeminent World War I historian who should be coming to speak to this group as well. It should be a treat. We'll be there giving lectures on World War I, on the Lost Battalion, and on Bleckley himself. Oh, that was the kitchen. I thought I was getting heckled. I'm like, man, it's my first speech in a while, but I didn't expect to be heckled already. So this board, I've known them and been working with Doug and Grant since January. Greg I've known for a couple years now. Fine people, fine individuals. We're taking a huge salary from this, a whopping $0, to honor one of Wichita's native sons and true heroes. So it's a 501c3 organization. Nobody's taking $1 out of this. Everything, political capital that you all might have and be willing to donate, and then, you know, actual capital, because we're not going to say no to a single check, but we're happy to do this. We're going to kick this off, get exposure in the community, and that's probably my number one thing. My number one ask for you is to take the Bleckley story and to tell it to someone. Just tell them who Erwin is. Tell them we have Bleckley Street. Tell them we have the obelisk, but what we don't have is Rickenbacker Air Reserve Base. We don't have Luke Air Force Base. We have nothing in the community at large that honors Erwin in the way that we feel that a true Wichita hero should be honored. One story I'll just leave you with, Guinness finally came back with their approval after about 4 months of waiting, with the specifications of how they want the record audited. I've got to have a camera inside the airplane focused on the altimeter to make sure I hit 2,000 MSL every circuit. I've got to have 60 meters marked off on the runway that the airplane rolls through with the camera focused on that every time. I've got to have a certified timekeeper that has athletic experience, that knows how to time a race. I've got to have a safety pilot with me, a reserve aircraft, and then relief timers that are on the ground just tick marking the landings. If we're going to do that, I think we should audit Biden's 80 million votes. But thank you all so much for your time, and I think we'll open it up to questions now.
Okay, Pachyderm members first.
Everything you wanted to know about Erwin, this is the time to ask. Oh, you guys, you weren't going to ask a question, you were just asking for your check, right? Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming and sharing with us this information. Are there other Medal of Honor winners from this area that you know of?
There are 4 total with Wichita ties. There is Paul Foster from 1914 Veracruz Army. He's buried in Arlington. There is, oh Lord, I'm trying to think of the World War II Army. His name escapes me, but he's buried, I think, in Maple Grove Cemetery, World War II. Then there is McGonaghy from naval, who was the captain of the USS Liberty in 1967 when it took fire from Israeli aircraft, strangely enough. He earned the Medal of Honor during that action. All these gentlemen have Wichita ties. Some were born here and then moved off later and raised elsewhere, or some were born elsewhere and raised here eventually. To my knowledge, Erwin is the only one of the 4 that has complete Wichita ties. He was born here, he was raised here before he went off to military service. So he is the most thorough Wichitan of the 4 Medal of Honor recipients that I know of.
The street Bleckley, is that named after him or after his family?
That was named after Erwin. That's part of what Wichita did to memorialize him. They built the obelisk out at the VA hospital and they named Bleckley Street. But shows you how people's memories fade with time. I've talked to people who have lived on Bleckley Street and didn't realize where the name came from. And that's why we want to put this memorial out at the Eisenhower terminal. 2 million people a year pass through that terminal. And we want them to all walk past that Bleckley Memorial. And that's where we need your, like I say, financial, but we're really going to need your political horsepower and help to get the city to petition the FAA for the expansion. We only have to come up with 10%. The FAA will come up with 90% out of that general aviation fund. So that's where all of you and all of your acquaintances, all your friends, sign up to our website so that when we do an electronic petition to the city, that the city knows that this is coming from not us, but from citizens of Wichita. So that's where we need your political capital.
Let me add something to your question. Did you know before it was Mid-Continent that they were going to call it Bleckley Field? And it was voted down at that time. Also, and you may or may not know this, there was a U.S. military ship that was named the USS Erwin R. Bleckley. It was a troop carrier in Korea. I had a gentleman, officer I worked with in the Kansas National Guard that actually rode that troop carrier to combat in Korea, the USS Erwin R. Bleckley. I don't know what happened to the ship. I've not heard anything else about it.
Question I'd like to ask concerning Lieutenant Bleckley's missions. How many of them were in the DH-4, and how many total missions did he end up flying? Do we have a rough idea or a specific idea in terms of how many missions he was?
They were all in the DH-4. The 50th Aero didn't make it to France until, wasn't it August of 18?
Yeah.
August of 18. He died in October 6th of 18. So they were only on station for just about 12 weeks.
But the mission was actually given to them on the 2nd of October. 2nd or 3rd of October, the division commander of the 77th said, I got these troops out there and we need to get supplies to them. You guys go do it. That was the order to the 50th Aero Squadron. And they started flying on the 5th of October to do that very exact mission. And there was probably about 4 or 5 flights that they sent down initially to fly over the area. Can I have a second? I want to take a second.
Go ahead.
And I made a comment about the historians that said they failed in their mission. Their mission was to locate and find the Lost Battalion. They were in an area that was about the size of 3 football fields long and narrower because it was a ravine. Everybody knew where that unit was. That unit was where they were supposed to be, in that ravine. What the problem was, they weren't sure of the exact square foot that those guys were sitting on.
Yeah.
And when they were given the mission to fly over, they were flying with the wrong coordinates. That's where they dropped the supplies. All the historians tell you they failed because they didn't get the supplies to the American soldiers. Guess who they gave the supplies to? The Germans. That who was occupying, those are the people that were occupying the ground at that particular moment. But I will tell you this, and this is my argument, is maybe those supplies didn't land on target the way they were supposed to, but what it did do is it gave those 394 people that were still alive on the ground hope.
Yeah.
And they survived till the next day, the 7th of October. We had Aero Squadron people fly over, they spotted them, and the reinforcements came, and they saved those people.
If you look on a Google map, northwest of Binerville, France, to this day, the canopy cover, forest cover over Charlevoix Ravine is so dense, you can see why they had an almost impossible chance of spotting troops on the ground. It is so dense and thick, and ironically, Alvin York's Medal of Honor heroics happened only 2.5 miles to the northwest of Erwin's as the crow flies 2 days later. Yeah.
Some folks might not be familiar with what exactly Erwin did. And maybe you've told that story before.
Well, Erwin actually was the aerial observer, and the pilot was just going wherever the observers were telling them to go. Erwin was an observer because he of his mathematics. He was able to figure out positions and how to make the artillery come on target, how to locate things. So he also got about 5 hours of training for the of pilot training, which is still about is half of what the guy up front got. You know, they only got about 10 hours and then they were off flying too. But Erwin was kind of the brains of the mission. It was up to him to locate them, and they were flying so low and slow, it was to draw enemy fire. And they deduced that if where we're not getting shot at, where fire's not coming up from, that's where our guys are at.
Yeah.
So they were flying low and slow. Their first mission of October 6th, they were trying to draw that enemy fire to locate. When they came back to the domicile, Erwin told his captain, I know I've got the coordinates. I know exactly where to find them now. We're going to have to go back and try it again. And that's when the captain told him, you don't want to do this. Every plane that's been out searching has come back totally shot up, yours included, and by the way, the mechanics have grounded your airplane. It had over 40 rounds in it, hit the engine. So Erwin knew a pilot that flew number 6. They ordinarily flew number 2.
Tell them where it's from.
Basically, everybody know where Leon, Kansas is at? A guy named Floyd Pickerel was Erwin's buddy, so he asked Floyd Pickerel from Leon if he could borrow his airplane for that mission. So it was Floyd Pickerel's airplane that we are actually representing, because that was the Medal of Honor airplane that flew that mission. They went out on that second mission after he was advised, you don't want to do this. They went into the tent, and Erwin filled out his will, and they jumped in that airplane and they headed off for a second round. What's so unique is the entire Medal of Honor mission was observed. There was an American ambulance driver that was just on this side of the lines. The Lost Battalion was only a mile out in front of everybody else. He witnessed that first pass of Erwin throwing out the supplies. They came around for a second turn, got about 2/3 through the second turn, and the airplane lurched. And that's when we think that Gettler took the round. He was killed instantly by machine gun fire from above. The ridge had machine guns on it, and they were flying that low that they were actually getting shot at, and that's what killed Gettler instantly. Bleckley grabbed the controls, leveled it out, and this is being witnessed and described by the ambulance driver, American ambulance driver, headed back towards the U.S. lines and was set up to try and land in a field. And at the very last moment, the airplane just lurched forward, came in at about 30 degrees nose down. And what we think happened was Gettler's body fell forward and went right against the control stick and pulled the control stick out of Erwin's hands. Erwin was, the observer's station on that DH-4 was fairly deep, and sometimes they kind of stood because he could run a scarf mount Lewis gun on the back, and then he was throwing stuff overboard to try to resupply. That's why we think he was unsecured. He was thrown completely above the wing forward and landed head first into the dirt, and it broke his neck. He never regained consciousness, but they found the coordinates that he had written down. They got that back to the captain, and then that's how they sent out the relief column to find the troops. So that's the way the mission came down, and pretty powerful event. So like I say, he stepped up to the plate. So any other questions?
Yes, I'm Jim Hickman. I'm with the Derby Historical Society. I'm on the Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
And you don't know what a pleasure this is to me to hear all this information, because we are going to establish a scenario that covers his experience during World War I. And also in Derby, we have another Medal of Honor recipient there, and there's a small memorial set up for him in the south end of Derby, just south of where the big round barn is, for those who know where that is. But honest to goodness, I need to talk to you, and you, and you, and you.
Well, let us know if we can come to your site and do a presentation. We will figure that out, and we'll come.
Yep.
See, and we need people like you to help educate the community. Like I say, not 1 out of 1,000 Wichitans have a clue of who Bleckley was or what he did.
More people today know about Erwin Bleckley than the rest of Wichita.
Oh, I think this recognition for him
Long overdue.
is long overdue. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Express appreciation of the Pachyderm Club to Greg Zerker, Doug Jacobs, Grant Shoemaker, and Captain Zach Brown for listening to his life.